Okay, friends, Chris Mick here, and today I want to talk about something that's very important for me, maybe important for some of you, but it could be also important for somebody who thinks this is rubbish, I don't need it. Let's talk about modular synthesis, analog synthesizers, and especially Eurorack here. And what's so special about it? And we can discuss it. But please be gentle. It's my personal view, and I do all this in one big rush. And there's a reason for me doing this, because there's discussions out there that, well, Eurorack is dead, we don't need it. This is just like for somebody who wants to not do music at all. You cannot do music with this. So let's talk about it. The basic thing about this analog is I can do everything digitally. I have this Quest 3 here. I could use Apple Vision Pro, and there are synthesizers you can even virtually touch with your hands and move them around in a virtual space, or I can do everything with the DAW there. There's also some softwares who do this Eurorack thing virtually. So why should I do this here? And this question is a very personal one. What do you want? I'm a pilot also. I'm piloting planes, and there's Microsoft Flight Simulator, and I can do this in 3D space. Even with my joysticks, I get the feeling I can look around, I'm in a plane. But it's totally different from when you're sitting in a plane. In a real plane you can touch, and you're in the situation as a person with your physics, with your mentality, with everything. It's totally different, and I think most of you will agree. Like doing this simulations like railways or being in a real train. So this is fundamentally the same for me. I can have a virtual guitar or a real guitar, or I can have an acoustic guitar, electric guitar, and you must make up your mind what appeals you most. And what I found is you have all the possibilities, and it's very cheap to do everything I can do here, mostly from the outside. If you look up on it from the outside, you can do it virtually, and I don't need this really. But let me say some things about this, and let's get into it. What is so special about a tone like this one here? Let's take one. There's one module, and I put it in. Ain't that boring? At first sight it's boring, and it is boring. It's a sine tone, and this is not something that you will find in nature, because in nature you have sounds like this or that, and then you ask yourself, if I go down an octave, I can do everything with one oscillator here, or tune it. Even at that moment, the fascination starts for me. What's going on here? What about this sign? Why doesn't it appear in nature? And what about if I combine different signs and interpolate them, and then I have different overtones, and I go into FM synthesis. So even with this one VCO, if you get into it, you learn a lot of things. And this haptical thing, that's it. It's like experimental. You're sitting here, have the thing, put it in, and here's the tone, and then you start doing this. So what's so special about that? On the other hand, it's not music. Is it music? It's a question of definition. If you get to John Cage or go to Stockhausen or to guys from the 60s, they knew they had to break into new barriers. They had to break down barriers and get into new territory. And for that, an analog synthesizer was wonderful to do that. The other thing is, besides that I can touch it, I built this on my own. I understand what's going on here, how many volts do I need, and I also understand this is voltage I can listen to. It's not an algorithm, it's really voltage that's running in there. And at that moment, you're starting to try to understand what's going on here. Then you find yourself reading books like Brian Shepard, Refining Sound. Then you think, wow, why is a sign a sign? Why doesn't it appeal to me like that, or it appeals to me like that? Why is a square wave different from that? And then you get into that. And then you read books like Analogue Dreams, by Trevor Pinch and Frank Trocco, The Invention and Impact of the Moog Synthesizer, and you find that Dr. Moog, there's even some interviews with him on the web, thinks if you do something like that, he can feel it. Well, this is sort of esoteric, is it? But I can feel it also. There's something running. The electrons are running within this thing. It's not an algorithm. And I can touch it, and I've got the feeling something's going on here. And you get this sort of sensitivity for these modules, what's really going on here, and try to understand it and then read books. And this is one of the impact of this. Then it gets further into sound synthesis and sampling by Martin Russ. And you find yourself reading all these books, and then you want more. And if you want more, you need more modules. And then you add, for example, you have the sine wave again here. You add a second oscillator. And on the second oscillator, you might take a different wave. And then you find yourself tuning it. And this is something you do by ear, and you really need skills for that. I know many people who can't divide one octave from the other if you have two octaves. This is wonderful to do some exercises with that and understand. And what you also find is, subjectively, this sawtooth wave here is much stronger than this sine wave, because there are much more harmonics in there. So you try to understand the physics of sound, and for that you start to read books like Language of Electroacoustic Music, and you find yourself reading books like Music, Physics and Engineering, and at that moment you start to become a synthesist. You're not using this preset stuff. You don't have millions of plugins. I have all these plugins. And name it, I got it. But this is taking it down to the core here. You can touch it. You know it's voltage driven. It's very basic in a way, but everything is in here. You understand? And that's why Eurorack and modular is so important, to understand this thing right from scratch. Well, now you can say, okay, I take these modules in a virtual way, but believe me, try this and decide for yourself what's more interesting. I just told you about these glasses here and the difference between analog and digital. You can read so many people mentioning no, or this. You must try it all by yourself. Maybe you're sensible to it or not. The other thing about this is, if you get a wave like this, it sounds profane in a way. But the most important book for me to understand sound synthesis was by this guy named Devarahi, The Complete Guide to Synthesizers. I don't know, he had a tragical life, I think. He disappeared somewhere. You don't find anything about him. Maybe somebody can write down there what happened to this guy, what was his real name. I think he got some problems with ARP those days, because most of the things here are based on ARP 2600. But everything is in here. It's a very rare book. By the way, these books are very expensive if you want to buy them used somewhere, or you might find a PDF, I don't know. But there's everything in that was fascinating for me, and taken to the core, this book is also about the meditative side of it. When I started this Eurorack thing, I went into it's not like patching and saying, oh, this is this wave and this is that wave, and now I have two waves and I can change them against each other. But then you get lost in it. And this is what Devarahi says. you can do that for hours. If you're open to it, it gets meditative. So it's also a philosophical side on this. Sorry, I'm German. It's not that easy for me to do that. That you personally go into abysses of your oral experiences and find yourself in a meditative way. If you shut down the lights or do a candle here, you don't need reverb and all these things. Today everything is packed with effects. Just try to understand, what does it do to my soul if I have it on headphones here? Yes? And how high can I go? And how low can I go before it goes into different impulses you hear below 20 hertz or something like that. And that's also a result of you want to know what's happening there. And this is only the starting point, having two oscillators. And once you have two, you can take two square waves like this. And then you find, like we all know, the phases, that it's phasing against each other. And then you're in the physics of sound. But you do it immediately here with my fingers, and you can feel. Did you understand that one was octave up from the other one? And there's the point where you get these pulses. And there it gets this chorus flanging sort of effect. And this is also very nice if you go into very low frequencies. It sounds like a turboprop airplane, yeah, does it? And at that point you find that in life you get this sort of sounds at many places. But here you understand the core of what you hear in your life by just doing this, by experiment. It's like a laboratory of experimenting. That's also very interesting. And most of it, and that's what I like most of it, is intuitively. You can read these books, but you don't have to. What's also interesting, this is a historical thing. This is where it all started. I have the Prophet 10, well, that's later, and I have the OBX 8, that's a reminiscence to the old OBX, but I also have a Waldorf here, this is digital. But with Waldorf, I don't get to that point, yes? But we had this nice studio in Germany where Stockhausen and others work, WDR, you see another video from me on YouTube. These guys worked with sine tones and with oscillators, and this is where it all started. So you can't be wrong to start for yourself with something like that, yes? And so the next point, then you get curious about the whole thing. It's like putting together a big puzzle, and you have these chords, and you think, what about if I take a wave from this one and put it in to the other oscillator where the tune is? I just do it. Aha. And you get down below 20 hertz or something like that. And at that point, you don't only hear the waves, you understand how they work. It's also like an inner vision of what's happening here. It's like, okay, if I go down with the tuning, it gets slower and slower and slower. And if I take a sine wave and I have a very slow tuning and use this to tune the other one here, I even only need this one here, yes? I don't need both. Then I have this effect that I understand. How do oscillators really work? Yes? And then you get this Doctor Who stuff like EMS synthesizers. EMS synthesizer, I'm a specialist for the AKS and also Synths 100. There you have this matrix. It's very nice also, but it's not as appealing as this, but it has much more patch points than this one. Yes? But what about if I take this, what I did here, and take a different square wave out and do something that I get into CV in, the voltage in, of the tuning of the second VCO here. So they interfere with both, and then you find yourself within sort of chaos. And if you go up the octaves, you nearly get white noise. So what is white noise? Then you try to understand what that is. White noise is like it's all frequency in one, yes, in parallel. So everything you hear packed into one very, very complex wave. And you can even do that here, but if you change to different octaves, it's also changing, yes? And then it's starting to talk to you, yes? So it's still these two oscillators, and this is really nice what you can do only with two oscillators. You can also use noise, or you use a very, very slow oscillator with a wave that's going below what you have here, and that one is called LFO. We all know that. And with that you can do arithmetical stuff. If you get a square wave, it's like on, off, on, off. It's like digital in a way, isn't it? And I go in there. You have that, yes? And if I speed it up, then you understand more voltage means more energy going in and speeding up. Up to there. And if I use a different wave from the LFO, you have the woo. We all know this sounds, yes? This is very basic, but still timeless sounds with only these few oscillators. Before I give some more recommendations here, just one thing. If I use a filter then, and that's the next thing that's really important for you, and put this complex wave in there into audio, yeah, I can do this filter thing. And by the filter you understand how the energy of the voltage changes if you go down in a filter or go up, yes? So it's taken away energy, or it's adding energy at certain points if you put more resonance in. And you have something like this, and also the filter, and then you start to think, whoa, I get it more complex, and I understand more and more. What about if I use the second oscillator here with a very slow tuning, and I put it into the LFO here, CV. I get something like this. Or I take a second wave here and put it into the filter CV. And I can say how much of the filter CV must be affected, how much voltage is going in there. So then you have this, and it's starting to talk to you. Yes, and this is so fascinating. Sorry if I say it here, maybe you think this guy is totally stupid and boring, but I personally think it's totally great what you can do here with such only 3 modules. Yes, 2 oscill enough, LFO, 4 modules, and the filter. And I can speed it up. It's a little bit like R2-D2, yes? Star Wars stuff. And then you go wild and do much more cross modulation, like this. And it's getting more and more complex, and then you come to a point, and that's the most important thing, where it gets chaotic. And just philosophically spoken, this is like a metaphor for me to life. Now you say, this guy's totally crazy. No, it is. Because in life, you have these intentions, yes, and you have skills. And I have the skill, I know that my intention is to do a sine tone, and then take this patch cable and put it in there, and here it is. And sine tone I can really define, it's very easy. But if I take a different tone, like a square wave or one of the other waves, you have more overtones and harmonics, and it gets more chaotic in a way, the tone in itself, and it gets harder for you to define what are the overtones. Well, there's theories about it, and if you're getting into it, you still can define these are the overtones of this square wave. And they may change by using the filter. You get something out, you get something in. And from that point on, it gets more and more complex. And once you come to a point where there's more parameters you affect here, the more chaotic it gets. And at a certain point, you can come out like this here. And you don't even know what's happening there. And this is the sort of uncertainty that Don Buchla was talking about, and Susan Ziani, she could also talk about that. What's really happening there, the more complex it gets, the harder it will be for you to define what's really going on there. And do that with a plugin. Sorry, I never had that experience with a plugin. On the other hand, you get a feeling for from which point, where's the sweet spot, but from which point on do I get into territory I cannot really theoretically define for myself. Mathematically, it might be possible, but it gets chaotic and more complex, like a sort of fractal theory, and that's also something you can really learn with this. This is not only a musical instrument, it's also a mathematical instrument, and it's sort of a, if you're programming, you're informatic, this is programming. And this is so genius what Robert Moog and others invented. It's like analog programming. I have a friend on Facebook, he's one of the analog computing scientists in the world. It's really fascinating what you can do with such a machine here. And you understand how does programming work. I have my parameters, I combine them, I crossfade them, I put them through a filter, and I take an LFO and affect the tuning of something, and then it gets chaotic. From which point on do I know what I'm doing here, and from which point on the machine leads me to something that I didn't expect. And this is so fresh, this is so nice. If you're curious in your life and you want to learn things, you really get into that, yes? Then you can take something like patch and tweak, and if you don't, if you reach the point where you think, I need more of this, and have a look what's going on here, how can I do patch, how do all these things work? And then you find yourself at some certain point where you use other and more modules, but I would always start with two like oscillators, a filter and an LFO. Then you would take a DVCA or ADSR, you understand that. How did they know how a sound defines itself within time? Yes, this is running all the time here. But what about if I want to play it? I have this attack, decay, sustain, release. This was also genius. It's like MIDI. Dave Smith, thank you, rest in peace. He understood how to transfer this information. But this is the basis of musical sound information. What do you need? Like you need a sound source. It is an oscillator. You need something like a filter where you can say I hear it from near, or it's getting clearer, or the frequency spectrum is more present, or nothing. And then I need something, if I push a button, how long does it take until the sound is there? How long does it sustain? And if I leave the button here, when will it release? And all this happens in real life. So this is a sort of catalysator for what you encounter in real life, and this is a hidden I think this is a hidden information in doing something like this. And if somebody says this is not music, Sorry, do we stop with diatonic scales? Do we stop with chromatic? Ask our Balinese friends. They have totally different systems. And ask people from Bulgaria who learn to sing in pure tunings, totally different systems. And asked all the experts and guys from the 60s who said, okay, classical, romantic, it's over. We want to get into new territory and define music new. And to me, and that's also, you get more liberal. Not only in life, but you get more liberal for yourself if you use something like this. And at a certain point you think, is it music? What is the fascination? Do I have an emotion by hearing something like that? Why do I have an emotion doing something like that? Where does the emotion go when I don't like it anymore? Yes, but I like it. And how can I extend this emotion if I use some effects or something? And at that point, you get into more modules like morphogene, using samples and whatever. But the core of it all, and that's what I wanted to tell you here, it's very long and very personal, is using this here. Of course, this is not all what I can say about it. And I then had this book like the A of Z of analog, A to Z of analog synthesis, and you find yourself in the middle of where is the history of this, where did it all come from, and where does it go, and then you might take one of the newer synths here, Novation and Waldorf and the Roland, and then you find, well, I don't have to learn that much. I learned it already by using this here. So the fundamentals of synthesis, once you learned it this way, with this tools here, you really know what you're doing. And this is the goal. So my plaidoyer here is for, if you start synthesis and really want to get into it, take books, take some oscillators, build it on your own. This case is everything is built on my own here. I bought this, and then you understand how does it work. And from that moment, and you begin to patch, and then you get into territories you could not imagine before. And then you look back into history, what guys like Tangerine Dream, yesterday I bought an old vinyl, Atem by Tangerine Dream, and you understand what these guys did those days. It's so unbelievable. Martin Subotnik, Don Buchla. You don't need a keyboard. That's the last thing I want to mention. For doing this, you don't need a keyboard. This is sound synthesis at its best. And from there on, you take any pigments, whatever, if you Omnisphere, Serum, whatever you want to do, and you see immediately and understand what it's doing here. But every now and then you come back to this pure thing here to just understand what was going on at the very beginning of this, yes? So it's talking to me, I've been talking to you. Please don't crash me on YouTube, you know there's so many idiots around here. If you have something substantial, if you like it, okay, if you want to spread this, let's discuss. It's one of the rare videos. I don't do that on Web 2 because I teach that at university and also sound synthesis. This is only the tip of the iceberg, but if you like it, spread the word, or you say something what's important for me, or why do I not like it, because everybody is different. For me, this is really important, and the other things I understood right like that. And get fascinated with how few parameters the Prophet 10 spits out this incredible polyphonic sounds. But the core of it all was that. Thank you, see you next time, hope it wasn't boring, and yeah, write down something, and please not that I'm an idiot, because I'm not.